The alarm went off at 4:07 the morning. Daniel Harper did not groan. He did not lie still and stare at the ceiling and bargain with himself the way most people do. He simply opened his eyes, swung his legs over the side of the mattress, and sat there in the dark for exactly 3 seconds, which was all the self-pity he allowed himself each day. Then he stood up. The apartment was small, 2 bedrooms on the 4th floor of a building on Mercer Street that smelled faintly of old plaster and someone else's cooking. The carpet in the hallway had a watermark the shape of Tennessee near the bathroom door. The kitchen window faced a brick wall. Daniel had lived here for 4 years and had never once thought to hang curtains because by the time the light was good enough to matter, he was already gone. He moved through the kitchen in the dark by memory. Rice first. 2 cups, rinsed 3 times. He always rinsed it 3 times. It was something his wife Rebecca had taught him early in their marriage, laughing at him when he'd done it only once. "You have to be patient with it," she'd said. Her hands over his at the sink, warm water running over their fingers. Some things need more time to become what they're supposed to be. He thought about that most mornings. He tried not to, but he did. While the rice cooked, he cracked 2 eggs into a bowl and whisked them with a fork, not a whisk, because the whisk was somewhere in a box he still hadn't unpacked, and poured them into the small pan on the second burner. The eggs settled and spread. He used the spatula to fold it carefully. Then the exuk sich. He opened the packet and began cutting. This was the part that took the longest. He cut each small sausage into pieces with deliberate care, not slices, not chunks, but specific shapes. Stars when he had time, hearts when he was running behind. Today he had time, so he cut stars, 5-pointed, imperfect and tiny on the cutting board, while the rice finished and the kitchen filled with the kind of quiet warmth that belongs only to early mornings and no one else. At 5:15, he packed the first container. Lily's portion went into the yellow box, the one with the cartoon giraffe on the lid that she had picked out herself at the dollar store 2 summers ago and refused to give up despite the cracked hinge. Rice on the left, egg on the right. Stars arranged across the top in a loose constellation that spelled nothing and everything. His portion went into the blue container. The old one, lid warped from too many rounds in the microwave. Seal no longer quite flush. Rice, egg, 2 of the sausage pieces. Practical. Adequate. He set both containers on the counter and looked at them side by side for a moment. Then he went to check on his daughter. Lily was 8 years old, and she slept the way children sleep when they are completely certain of the world, arms flung wide, hair scattered across the pillow, one sock on and one off. Her chest rose and fell with the steady rhythm that Daniel still watched each morning, even now, even after the cardiologist had reduced the checkups to twice a year and used the word stable more often than not. He stood in the doorway and counted 5 breaths. Then he went to get dressed. Daniel Harper had been a software engineer once, a good one. He had designed back-end architecture for systems that processed millions of transactions per hour, had once led a team of 11 across 2 time zones, had been the youngest principal engineer in his department at 31. His name was still in the commit history of code running in production at 3 different companies he no longer worked for. That version of Daniel felt like a photograph of someone else. Rebecca had gotten sick when Lily was 2. The diagnosis came in November, a Tuesday, in a beige consulting room with a plastic plant in the corner. He remembered the plastic plant very clearly. He remembered thinking that someone had chosen it, had brought it there deliberately, had thought, "This room needs something living," and then had bought a fake one instead. They had tried everything the insurance covered. Then some things it didn't. Rebecca died on a Thursday in March, 3 months after Lily's 3rd birthday. She was 34 years old. Daniel took leave from work. The leave became a resignation. The resignation became 4 years of contract work, part-time, IT support, and minor system administration at a mid-level company called Vertex Solutions. Not because it was what he was built for, but because it let him be at the school gate at 3 o'clock. He was the man in the IT department who showed up quietly and left quietly. He wore the same rotation of shirts, all collared, all slightly too large, bought when he was heavier, before grief had worn a few pounds off him. He ate at his desk, or in the break room with his blue container, and did not attend the company lunches that required a $20 contribution. He fixed problems that were not his problems to fix. He did not complain. His colleagues were pleasant to him the way people are pleasant to furniture. He was used to it. The morning of the company event, he packed Lily's lunchbox before driving her to school. "Daddy." She held the yellow container up to the kitchen light and examined the constellation of sausage stars through the transparent lid. "You did stars again. I had time. I like when you have time." She tucked the box into her backpack with the serious efficiency of someone who understood that small things matter. "Are you going to the big lunch thing today? It's a company event." "Yes." "Are you bringing your food?" "Yes." She zipped her bag. "Good," she said firmly, as though this settled something important. "That way you know it's made with love." He looked at her. "Mrs. Patterson said that," she added quickly. "In class. About homemade food. Mrs. Patterson is right." Lily accepted this with a nod and ran to get her shoes. The medical bill came on a Wednesday, and Daniel opened it at his desk during lunch break. $1,420. Lily's quarterly cardiology review, plus the echocardiogram that Dr. Whitmore had ordered as a precaution after she'd had a brief episode of fatigue during gym class. Nothing serious, the doctor had been careful to say that, twice, with the particular gentleness medical professionals deploy when they want you to stay calm enough to hear the rest of what they're about to tell you. Nothing serious. But we want to be careful. $1,420 to be careful. Daniel folded the bill in half and placed it in his desk drawer under a manila folder. Then he opened his computer and got back to work, because that was the only thing he knew how to do when numbers looked like that. He had $341 in his checking account. He would call his brother-in-law Patrick tonight. Patrick had helped before, quietly, without ceremony. The way a good man lends money, like he's just handing you something you temporarily misplaced. Daniel hated asking. He asked anyway, because the alternative was not asking, and that was not something he allowed himself to consider. Around him, the office hummed with a different kind of energy. The quarterly company event had been announced 2 weeks prior. Not a routine team lunch, a formal company-wide gathering in the main conference hall, catered, with a keynote address from Vertex Solutions CEO Amelia Stone. 212 employees, buffet with 4 stations. A signature cocktail. People had been talking about it with the particular excitement of people who do not often feel important. Now suddenly given a reason to feel so. "Are you going up for the salmon?" asked Kevin from the adjacent cubicle, already loosening his tie in anticipation. "I'm bringing my own," Daniel said, not looking up. Kevin made a face. "Dude, it's catered. Free food." "I know. So why, Kevin?" Daniel looked up then. Not unkindly. "I have a system." Kevin raised his hands in mock surrender and went back to whatever he was doing. Daniel's system was this. Every dollar he did not spend on lunch was a dollar that could become something else. A copay. A prescription. A new pair of shoes when Lily outgrew her current ones. The math was simple and unromantic, and it was the math by which he organized his life. He packed the blue container that morning before he packed Lily's yellow one. Rice, egg, 2 pieces of sausage. He added a tangerine because Lily had left half of one on the counter and told him to take it. He did not tell her that he'd had no intention of bringing fruit otherwise. Amelia Stone was 37 years old, and she had been the CEO of Vertex Solutions for 3 years, which meant she had been CEO of Vertex Solutions for 3 years longer than most people had expected when she was appointed. The skepticism had been of the variety rarely spoken aloud, but always legible in the specific way people phrased compliments. Impressive for someone so young. Bold choice. The investment board had used the word dynamic 7 times in the press release and experienced 0 times, which told you something about the argument they were having with themselves. Amelia had responded by growing revenue by 18% in her first year. She was not warm. She did not pretend to be. She wore precision like armor-tailored blazers, controlled posture. A voice calibrated to carry just far enough and no further. She remembered names, but only the ones she needed to remember. She ran meetings that started and ended on time. She believed that a company's culture was revealed not in its mission statement, but in whether its people showed up prepared, and she had a particular and visible disdain for what she called theatrical vulnerability, the culture of public oversharing, of treating the office like a confessional. She did not hate people. She simply had not yet been given a compelling reason to need them. The company event had been her assistant Trevor's idea, a response to a quarterly engagement survey that had used the words disconnected and hierarchical twice each. Amelia had approved it with the brisk efficiency of someone ticking a box. She did not anticipate that a lunch event would change anything. She did not anticipate anything at all. She was also, that morning, dealing with the fact that Castleton Partners, their second largest client, had signaled through back channels that they were reconsidering the renewal, $3 million in annual contract revenue, a leak in the data infrastructure pipeline that her team had not yet located. A board meeting in 11 days. She arrived at the conference hall at noon with a migraine forming behind her left eye and a folder of quarterly projections she intended to review while the employees ate their catered salmon. The conference hall had been transformed with the competent, impersonal effort of corporate event planning, round tables with white linens, name placards that no one paid attention to. The buffet stretched along the far wall, chafing dishes gleaming. The salmon and roasted vegetables and miniature quiche arranged with the studied casualness of food that has been made to look effortless. A small stage at the front with a lectern and a projector screen displaying the company logo. 212 people circulated, filled plates, found seats. Daniel found a chair at a table near the back corner, close to the emergency exit, not because he was planning to leave early, but because corner seats were quieter. He set his blue container on the table beside his water glass. He did not go to the buffet. He opened the container, laid his paper napkin across his knee, and began to eat. He was not self-conscious about it. He had eaten his own lunches at company events before. It drew occasional glances, but glances were not his problem. He was halfway through the rice when the room quieted for Amelia's address. She walked to the stage with the unhurried certainty of someone accustomed to rooms quieting when they enter. She wore a dark blazer over a white blouse. She had a glass of water. She had no notes. "I want to talk today about what professional excellence looks like," she began. "Not as a concept, as a practice, as a daily choice." Her voice was clear and level. People listened, not because they were inspired, but because not listening felt dangerous. Daniel Ate. Amelia spoke about standards, about representation, how each employee represented the company not just in client meetings but in every space they occupied. She spoke about image, about intentionality, about the small choices that compose a professional identity. She was moving through the room as she spoke, the way some executives do, a kind of controlled circling that projects energy and accessibility simultaneously. She passed the middle tables. She passed the tables on the left. She reached the back corner. Her gaze traveled across the table, the water glasses, the buffet plates, the properly arranged silverware, and landed on Daniel's blue container. She stopped. There was a pause so brief that only a few people near that table noticed it. Then Amelia Stone reached down and picked up the container. It happened quickly. "I'm sorry," she said, her voice still even, still carrying. She turned slightly toward the room. "I want to pause for a moment." The room's attention, which had been drifting in the comfortable way of people with full plates, sharpened. She held up the blue container, its warped lid, its faded color, the condensation still beaded along the sides. She held it up the way one might display evidence. "This," she said, "is what one of our employees brought to represent themselves at a company event." A few people turned to look. Someone near the middle tables recognized whose table that was. The recognition spread. Daniel set down his fork. "I have to be honest," Amelia continued, and her voice had taken on the particular quality of someone performing disappointment for an audience. "When I talk about professional standards, I mean this. I mean how we carry ourselves. A catered event. And someone brings," she glanced at the container, "what appears to be rice from home. Laughter. scattered at first, then broader. Is this what we want people to see when they look at us? The laughter continued. Daniel sat very still. His phone buzzed on the table. He glanced down. Lily's face on the screen. Video call. He answered it. Daddy. Her small face appeared, bright against the hospital waiting room behind her. She was at the afternoon check-in with Patricia, the after-school care coordinator who took her to appointments when Daniel was working. I just wanted to make sure you ate. Did you eat? Amelia heard it. The room heard it. I'm eating now, sweetheart. Did you eat all of it? Almost. Okay. She seemed satisfied. I love you, Daddy. I love you too, Lily. He ended the call. The laughter had stopped. Amelia still held the blue container. The room was quiet in the way that precedes something the held breath quiet of 200 people realizing simultaneously that they may have just made a mistake. Daniel placed both hands flat on the table. He pushed back his chair. He stood. He was not tall. He was not imposing. He was a 40-year-old man in a collared shirt that was slightly too large, with the kind of face that years of quiet difficulty give a person not hardened, exactly, but settled, the way wood settles when it has been bearing weight for a long time and learned to do it without cracking. He looked at Amelia. My wife died 5 years ago, he said. His voice was quiet. Not soft quiet. There is a difference. Soft things yield to pressure. Quiet things simply do not raise themselves to the noise around them. She had a heart condition. So does our daughter. Lily is 8. He paused. The container you're holding. I packed it this morning after I packed her lunch. I cut the sausage into stars because she likes stars. I use the blue one so I don't mix them up. Not a sound. I bring my own lunch because every dollar I don't spend here is a dollar I can spend on her care. Last month it was a copay. This month it's an echocardiogram. He let that word sit in the air for a moment. I'm not embarrassed by what's in that container. It was made at 5 in the morning by someone who loves his daughter. He reached out his hand. Amelia placed the container back in it. He sat down. He picked up his fork. He finished eating. The room did not burst into applause. That was not what happened. What happened was quieter, and in some ways more powerful. 200 people sat with what they had just participated in. And the weight of that participation settled over the room like something cold. Amelia Stone stood at the front of the room with a glass of water she had stopped pretending to drink. And for the first time in 3 years of company leadership, she had nothing to say. Trevor, her assistant, appeared at her elbow. Do you want to? Should I? No, she said. She set down the glass. She walked off the stage. She walked through the hall and out the side door, and down the corridor to her office, and she closed the door behind her with the controlled precision of someone who will not allow themselves to slam it. She stood at the window for a long time. The office was on the 14th floor. And from the window, Amelia could see the street below. The lunch crowd, the small figures moving with the purposeful randomness of people who know where they are going. She thought about her father. His name had been Gerald Stone, and he had worked the overnight shift at a printing facility in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, for 22 years. He smelled like ink, and he drove a 1994 Honda Civic, and he wore the same 5 shirts on rotation, washed on Sunday nights, hung to dry in the bathroom because the dryer in the building's laundry room cost $1.50, and he was the kind of man who kept mental tallies of $50. He had been the quietest person Amelia had ever known, not shy quiet. She understood that now, in a way she hadn't until today. He didn't raise his voice because he'd never needed anyone else to hear him, only to live with him. And living with him was its own kind of instruction. She had been 14 when her father's supervisor at the facility, a man named Connors, which was a name she had never forgotten, had pulled Gerald aside at the company Christmas party in front of her mother and the other employees and said, with the casual cruelty of someone who had never had to think about cruelty, Gerald, you've been wearing that same jacket to these things for 5 years. The company has a professional image to maintain. Her father had said nothing. He had smiled and nodded and taken it. He'd taken it with exactly the same quiet that Daniel Harper had sat down and picked up his fork. But Amelia had not been quiet. She had been 14 and furious. And she had never forgiven her father for what she had decided was weakness. Later, much later, after Gerald died of a cardiac event at 59, still working overnight because the pension wasn't quite enough to retire on, she understood that it had not been weakness. It had been a kind of strength she had not yet developed the capacity to recognize. She had spent the next 20 years building armor out of her father's silence. And she had just used that armor to do to Daniel Harper precisely what Connors had done to Gerald Stone. She sat down at her desk. She put her face in her hands. She didn't sleep well that night. By 7 the next morning, she had Daniel Harper's personnel file on her screen. She was not someone who dug into employee files. She had 212 people working for her, and she knew approximately 40 of them by name and fewer still by anything more than function. But she opened this one and she read it the way you read something you expect to contradict you, and are quietly, uncomfortably surprised when it does not. Daniel Arthur Harper. 40 years old. Hired 4.5 years prior as an IT support specialist, level 2. Annual salary. $51,000. Performance reviews. Consistently meets expectations, with occasional supervisor notes thorough, reliable. Takes initiative beyond role description. She read that last phrase twice. She called HR. Sandra, from Human Resources, was a woman of 51 who had been with the company since before Amelia's tenure, and who spoke with the careful precision of someone who has learned that information shared without context tends to create problems. "Mr. Harper," Sandra said. "Yes." "I know him a little. Tell me what you know." A pause. "Is this related to yesterday's event?" "Yes." Another pause, shorter. "He's a good man," Sandra said. "He comes in early most days. He covers for people quietly, without putting it in a ticket. If someone has a technical issue and the help desk queue is backed up, he'll just fix it. I've seen him troubleshoot systems at 11 at night and be back at 8 the next morning. He stays late? Some nights. I think it's easier for him when his daughter is at her grandmother's." Amelia said nothing. "He turned down the Employee Assistance Fund last year," Sandra continued. "The hardship grant. He qualified easily single parent, documented medical costs, but he said he didn't want to take something from someone who needed it more." Amelia wrote that down on a notepad. She did not know why she wrote it down. She just did. "There's something else," Sandra said. "Before he came to us, did you see his background? His prior employment?" Amelia scrolled back through the file. Previous employer. Helix Systems. She knew that name. Helix Systems had been a B2B infrastructure company acquired by a larger group 4 years ago. They had built, among other things, a proprietary data pipeline architecture that had become something of an industry reference case for high-throughput transaction processing. The name of the lead engineer on that project was listed in a trade publication article she had once read during due diligence on a different acquisition. Daniel Harper. She sat back. She looked out the window. Then she picked up the phone and called Trevor. "Get me the technical lead on the Castleton infrastructure audit," she said. Today, she saw him by accident. It was a Thursday evening, and Amelia was at Street Clements Medical Center for a board committee meeting. Vertex Solutions held a small corporate foundation stake in the hospital's technology modernization program. The meeting ended at 7. She was walking toward the elevator with Trevor when she turned a corner and stopped. Daniel Harper was asleep in a chair in the cardiology wing corridor. He was sitting upright, head tipped back against the wall, arms folded across his chest, his jacket draped over the empty chair beside him. His face in sleep had the quality of exhaustion that has become so habitual it no longer registers as anything other than rest. On the chair beside him, under his jacket as though it were a blanket, was a small girl. She had dark hair. She was too old to be sleeping in a hospital chair, and young enough that it didn't matter. One of her socks had a stripe of yellow on the cuff. She was sleeping with the absolute completeness of a child who has been here before and knows that here is safe enough. Amelia stood in the corridor and looked at them. Trevor said something quiet and she didn't hear it. There was a book on the floor, face down. A drawing on the seat beside the jacket, a child's drawing. Crayon on printer paper, of two figures standing next to something rectangular. She couldn't quite see it from where she stood. She took 3 steps closer. Careful. Quiet. The rectangular thing in the drawing was a lunchbox. One figure was tall and one was small. They were holding hands. Above the tall figure, in the labored capital letters of a child who has recently become proud of her spelling, it said, "My dad is the best cook." Amelia stood there for a long moment. Then she walked to the elevator. She rode down 14 floors in silence. In the lobby, she told Trevor to get the car, and then she stood outside the hospital's sliding doors in the October air and breathed. She thought about what strength was supposed to look like. She thought about her father's jacket. She thought about how she had stood in front of 200 people and held up a blue container as though it were a failure, when it was, in fact, the exact opposite of a failure. She stood there for a long time, 9 days before the Castleton Partners contract renewal meeting. Vertex Solutions' primary data infrastructure suffered a coordinated intrusion. It happened at 11:42 on a Tuesday night. The intrusion, a sophisticated input layer exploit targeting the authentication pipeline, was not immediately visible in the monitoring dashboards because whoever had designed it had specifically modeled their approach around the dashboard parameters, knowing which alerts would trigger and which wouldn't. This was not a smash and grab. This was a patient, deliberate breach. The on-call team discovered it at 12:15 when client-facing data began returning corrupted queries. By 12:30, the head of infrastructure, a man named Brett Carver, had convened an emergency response in a secure back room. By 1 a.m., they had 3 theories and no solutions. The breach had targeted something specific. The legacy pipeline segment that processed Castleton Partners' transaction data. Amelia was woken at 1:17 a.m. She arrived at the office at 2:03 a.m. "Where are we?" she asked, still in the doorway. "We know the entry point," Carver said. "We don't know how to close it without taking the whole pipeline offline." Which means Castleton sees the outage. Yes, and we lose the renewal. Possibly. The room was quiet in the grim, fluorescent way of rooms where people are trying to solve problems they don't fully understand. Amelia walked to the whiteboard. She stared at the architecture diagram. "Who built this pipeline?" she asked. Original version was Carver checked his notes. "Helix Systems. We inherited it in the acquisition 4 years ago. We've modified it, patched it, but the core authentication layer is original." "Who designed the original authentication layer?" A pause. Carver looked at the document. Then he looked at Amelia. "It says here a Daniel Harper," he said slowly. "But he's in IT support downstairs." Amelia was already on her phone. The call woke Daniel at 2:11 a.m. He listened. He said, "I'll be there in 20 minutes. He called Patricia, who thankfully answered, who agreed without complaint to come stay with Lily. He was dressed and out the door in 8 minutes. He arrived at the office at 2:34 a.m. and walked into the response room and looked at the whiteboard and said, "The vulnerability isn't in the authentication layer. It's in the input handling upstream. The authentication layer is where it's exploited." "But that's not where it lives." Carver stared at him. "How do you—" "I built it. I know where I cut corners." Daniel moved to the keyboard. "Give me access." They gave him access. He worked for 4 hours and 11 minutes without stopping. He drank 1 cup of coffee that someone placed beside him and did not notice going cold. He typed. He traced. He rebuilt a segment of code from memory, modifying as he went, applying a patch that closed the exploit, without taking the pipeline offline, a solution that required understanding not just what the system did, but why it had been built to do it that way, which was knowledge that existed in exactly one person. At 6:45 a.m., the Castleton Partners data pipeline was clean, secure, and running. Amelia, who had been in the room for most of those 4 hours, stood by the wall and watched him close his laptop. He looked up. They were the only 2 people still in the room. "Thank you," she said. He nodded. "I need to." She stopped. Started again. What happened at the company event? I owe you. It's fine. It's not fine. He looked at her steadily. Not with anger, something more complicated. The look of a person who has long since passed the stage of wanting things from people who don't have them to give. It's done, he said. We're okay. He stood up. I need to get home. Before Lily wakes up, he picked up his jacket. He left. Amelia stood in the room alone, surrounded by the cooling servers and the whiteboard diagrams, and the wreckage of a night that had been dismantled and repaired by a man she had humiliated in front of 200 people over a container of rice. She picked up her phone. She called Trevor. Schedule a company-wide meeting, she said. Friday. All hands. The second time Amelia Stone stood at the lectern in the Vertex Solutions conference hall with 200 people watching her, she had notes. She had spent the better part of Thursday writing and rewriting them. Not because she didn't know what she wanted to say, she knew exactly what she wanted to say, but because she wanted to say it correctly, without performance, without the kind of calculated sincerity that people deploy when they want to be forgiven while retaining the upper hand. She had shown the draft to no one except Sandra from HR, who had read it and said, simply, yes. That. The hall was full. The mood was the particular mood of a company-wide all-hands that has been called without a stated agenda. Cautious, alert, slightly afraid of what it might mean. People had theories. Most of them involved cutbacks. A few people near the back were running the math on their last 3 performance reviews. Daniel Harper was sitting in the same back corner as before. He had his blue container in his bag. He had not been told to come to this meeting. The invitation had gone to everyone, and he had come because a company all hands was something you came to, and he was the kind of person who shows up. Amelia walked to the lectern. She did not pace the room this time. 9 days ago, she said, I stood at this lectern, and I was unkind. The room became very still. I picked up a colleague's lunch, and I held it up in front of all of you as an example of what I didn't want to see. I did it to make a point about professional standards. She paused. The point I actually made was about my own failures as a leader and as a person. She looked toward the back corner. Daniel, will you stand up? A beat. Daniel stood. Slowly. With the careful deliberateness of someone who has learned to be cautious about what public attention means. I owe you a public apology, Amelia said, because what I did to you was public, and the correction has to be public too, or it doesn't count. She turned slightly toward the room. Daniel Harper has been with this company for 4.5 years. In that time, he has quietly fixed problems that weren't his to fix, covered shifts, solved issues the help desk couldn't get to. And this week, she stopped. Collected herself this week, when our most critical client relationship was at risk because of a breach in infrastructure that none of us could solve. Daniel came in at 2 in the morning and repaired code that he built years ago, from memory, in 4 hours, without complaint, without being asked, and without expecting anything in return. The room was completely silent. The container I held up was not unprofessional. It was a man making lunch for his 8-year-old daughter at 5 in the morning before a long day. It was a father who cuts food into the shapes she likes, who brings his own lunch, so that every dollar he saves can go toward her medical care. She looked back at Daniel. I did not know your story, but here is the thing I should have understood before I opened my mouth. I didn't need to know your story to treat you with dignity. She stepped back from the lectern. I'm sorry, Daniel, she said, genuinely. You did not deserve what happened in this room. For a moment, no one moved. Then someone began to clap. Then several people. Then the whole room, rising not the performative standing ovation of people who want to be seen standing, but the kind that happens because the body needs to do something with what it's feeling. Daniel stood in the back corner with his arms at his sides. He looked at Amelia. He nodded. It was a small nod. Precise. It contained a full sentence. He sat back down. After the room cleared, Amelia found him at the elevator. I want to offer you a promotion, she said. Principal Systems Architect. It's the role you were doing when you were at Helix, functionally. The salary reflects that. Daniel was quiet for a moment. You're not offering it because you feel guilty, he said. It was not a question. I'm offering it because it's what the job pays, and you've been doing half of it anyway. She paused. The guilt is separate. I'll carry that on my own time. He pressed the elevator button. I'll think about it, he said. That's all I'm asking. The elevator opened. He stepped in. The code fix, he said, turning. The vulnerability. It was in the input validation layer, the part that checks what's being sent before it reaches authentication. Old systems skip that step. Most people don't think to look there because authentication is where things fail visibly. She looked at him. That's useful to know, she said. Most things look like one problem and are actually a different one, he said. You just have to know where to look. The elevator doors closed. 3 weeks later, Vertex Solutions announced the formalization of the Vertex Family Support Initiative, a company fund providing emergency medical and child care grants to full-time employees. The announcement was written by Amelia, with input from Sandra in HR and from Daniel, who had agreed to join the fund's advisory committee. He had also accepted the promotion. He started in the new role on a Monday. He wore the same rotation of shirts. He got to work early. He still occasionally fixed problems that weren't technically his, out of habit, and because he could, though now at least he had the seniority to put his name on the ticket. Lily was doing well. Dr. Whitmore's most recent assessment had used the word encouraging, which in cardiology is approximately equivalent to a standing ovation. She was in 3rd grade and had recently announced her intention to become either a marine biologist or a professional star cutter, a career she had apparently invented herself. On a Saturday in November, Daniel took her to Riverside Park. It was cold enough for jackets, warm enough for the good kind of cold, the kind that makes everything sharp and bright. The sky, the particular shade of blue that only appears when the air is dry and the light hits it at an angle. They found a bench near the fountain, which was off for the season, and Daniel opened the bag. Yellow container for Lily, blue for himself. Lily opened hers and examined the constellation of sausage stars with the critical eye of a regular. You did extra points on this one, she said. I had a lot of time. I like when you have a lot of time. They ate. The park moved around them, joggers, a man walking an enormous dog, 2 small children shrieking at pigeons with the operatic commitment of people who have discovered something magnificent. Daddy, Lily said, mouth still half full. Chew first. She chewed, swallowed. Do you like your new job? Yes. Is it hard? It's interesting. Interesting is better than hard. She considered this. Is your boss still mean? He looked at her. Where did you hear about that? Patricia told Grandma, and Grandma told me. Daniel was going to have a conversation with his mother about information channels. She's not mean anymore, he said. Did she say sorry? Yes. Good. Lily returned to her container with the satisfied closure of someone who considers justice served. People should always say sorry when they're mean. Even if it's embarrassing. You're right. I know. She found a particularly good star. She ate it first, which was the system. Is she your friend now? Daniel thought about that. He thought about Amelia Stone, standing at a lectern, with notes she had written and rewritten, saying, I did not need to know your story to treat you with dignity. He thought about the particular courage of that of a person who has built their entire professional identity on not needing anyone, choosing to stand in front of 200 people and dismantle it. I think she's trying to be a different kind of person, he said. That's not the same as being a friend. But it might be the start of something. Lily seemed to accept this. A few minutes later, footsteps on the gravel path. They both looked up. Amelia Stone was walking through the park, with her coat buttoned against the cold, a coffee in one hand, the particular slightly startled expression of someone who has encountered a coincidence too direct to be comfortable with. She stopped when she saw them. There was a moment. Daniel raised his hand, a small, uncomplicated wave. Amelia crossed the path. I didn't know you came here, she said. Every Saturday when the weather's decent. She looked at Lily. Lily looked back at her with the frank, measuring gaze of a child who has been told about this person and is now conducting her own assessment. You're the lady from Daddy's work, Lily said. I am, Amelia said. He said you're trying to be a different kind of person. A beat. He's right, Amelia said. I am. Lily considered this for a moment. Then she reached into her yellow container and extracted a perfect five-pointed sausage star and held it out. "These help," she said, with the absolute sincerity of someone who believes this completely. Amelia looked at the small piece of food in the small extended hand. She took it. She ate it. She stood there in Riverside Park on a November Saturday, with the wind picking at her coat and the fountain empty, and the sky the particular shade of blue that only appears when the air is dry and the light hits it at the right angle, and something behind her eyes gave way quietly, without ceremony. The way things give way when they have been holding too long. "Thank you," she said. "You're welcome," said Lily, already looking for the next star. Daniel Harper closed the lid of the blue container and tucked it into the bag. Lily had finished hers and was now feeding what remained of a piece of bread to a squirrel she had named Gerald. Apparently on impulse. The park moved. The cold air moved. The light moved across the tops of the trees the way light does when the afternoon is thinking about becoming evening. He thought about all the things he didn't have, the bigger apartment he hadn't gotten to yet, the retirement account that had been paused, the career that had folded into itself for 5 years and was only now beginning to unfold. All the mornings before 5 a.m., all the bills opened and folded and placed in drawers. Then he thought about the yellow container, the stars, the way Lily had said, without irony or instruction, without any sense of the weight she was carrying, "I like when you have time." He looked out at the park. He thought, "I have time right now." And it was, on balance, more than enough. Some battles are fought in silence. Some strength has no audience. And sometimes the most important thing a person can carry into a hospital corridor, into a conference hall, into a November park on a bench by an empty fountain, is a container of food made at 5 in the morning by someone who means it. You never know what war the person beside you is fighting, but you can always choose how you look at them.